2 days ago. See, you wouldn't know. Honestly, there's so much news happened this week that when big stuff happens, including a shake-up of New Zealand gun laws, as announced, I think it was on Tuesday, obliterated by, first of all, Te Pāti Māori's news, and then obviously by the extraordinary story coming out of the police on Tuesday afternoon. But nonetheless, there was, as a result of the final decisions I understand reached on Monday morning, and as a result of National's coalition agreement with ACT, the gun reforms or new gun laws that will be aimed, quote unquote, to be fairer, fit for purpose, and improve the safety of New Zealanders. And also, the person who headed those particular laws, she won some of the arguments and she didn't win some of the others, is our next guest, the Honourable Associate Justice Minister Nicole McKee, and she joins us now. Nicole, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Michael. It's great to be with you once again.
Listen, just before we go and talk about New Zealand gun laws, I guess you would be as shocked as much by what's been happening to do with the police in the last 48 hours as well. And I noticed that some of these gun laws are going to be involved with the police, or that in actual fact they will take some of the regulations away from the police and the establishment of a specialist firearms regulatory agency. We'll talk about that in just a second. But is it your experience of the police that they tend to look after their own?
I think what's really important, Michael, is to actually acknowledge our frontline police officers that are out there every day trying to make a better place for New Zealand. What we have seen over the last few days has come from the National Office, not from our frontline. And it's really important that when we have a look at changes that are happening everywhere, not just in firearms, from that perspective, it's about trying to rebuild trust and confidence between the licensed firearm owning community and the regulator or administrator of the firearms laws. Now, I had been saying for some time that we needed to get New Zealand Police out of there in order to have or enable them to concentrate on enforcement only and have a regulator and administrator that also serves those licensed firearm owning communities. So with everything that's happened over the last few days, Michael, I think it's really pertinent to say that what's happened at the top is absolutely disgusting. It's sad for New Zealand. It's sad for police leadership. It's been found out. We have good people involved now. But most importantly, we also need to ensure that victims, especially victims of sexual assault, can feel that they can speak out and should be able to speak out. And what we have seen, or what's become evident over the last few days, is the very good people at Police National Headquarters, the whistleblowers, if you like, that actually stuck to their guns, if you excuse the pun, to make sure that there was accountability to what had occurred and bring it out into the open. So I hope that our New Zealand society probably share the disgust that we all have and what's happened, but also recognise that there are good people in New Zealand Police who have blown this up, and a lot of good people sit on our front line and in our communities doing good work every day.
I understand what you're saying, but Nicole, the reality is that the changes that you've made in the gun law would suggest that there's been a breach of trust between the police and gun owners as well. I mean, you even made the point, as you've just said.
Yes.
You need to rebuild the trust of law-abiding legal gun owners with the police. What did the police do wrong in your view in the way in which they administered the law?
Well, it begins with the high-handed approach that they had taken to licensed firearms events of March 15, 2019. New Zealand Police, and again it was the high-up at police, stood on the podium and said that everything that they did was correct and they were going to come after the licensed firearm owners. And the way that they went after them There were incidents that we were aware of where police were turning up armed, going into houses where there were children, and these were with law-abiding LFOs. They were being very heavy-handed, and it destroyed that trust and confidence. It's my job to try and build that back. And so getting New Zealand Police out of the regulation and administration of firearms, leaving them with enforcement, was a really big part of that. And of course, Michael, I had no idea that any of this other stuff was going on. I was only looking at the firearms side of it and the trust and confidence lacks that we had there.
Okay. Listen, the reaction of all the changes happened in the wake of the mosque massacre in Christchurch. I mean, I've characterised that it's a bit like the Christchurch earthquake. There's a tendency for government agencies to always overreact to some sort of disaster, whether man-made or natural. Did that happen here in terms of the crackdown on illegal firearm owners as well?
It certainly did, but it didn't just happen in 2019. It happened after Aramoana as well. And what we now have is a piece of legislation that's really old that only gets amended when there's something that happens that becomes an emotive issue. And so instead of going through a really good, robust process through Parliament for lawmaking, we've rushed it. So in 2019, for example, there was only 3 days for submissions. Laws were just rushed through, and there's a lot of errors that have come about because of that. So doing this whole rewrite enables us not only to modernise the law, but to fix all of those issues. And of course, Michael, I'm doing a full 6-month select committee process so that we make sure that we get it right and get it right the first time or as best as we can, instead of having these haphazard laws that don't make sense. I've had lawyers and judges say to me that there's conflict within the current legislation where things just don't make sense with others. In the new layout, we'll be saying things like it will be an offence to, and list what it is, but a defence to that may be. That way, not only do the licensed owners understand what their legislative requirements are, but so will the lawyers, so will the judges, so will police as enforcers, and the regulator as well.
Now, you didn't get everything through Cabinet, obviously. In fact, one of the things that was something that you were personally desiring of, and it's being portrayed here as the future of access to military-style semi-automatic weapons. Is that a motive, that military-style semi-automatic weapons? Is that something that the media have created, or those gun activists who argue that semi-automatic should not be available? What's the difference between military-style and ordinary semi-automatic weapons?
Not much, actually. In 1992, we had created a new endorsement, which was the E category or military-style semi-automatic endorsement. And that was based on a person having a semi-automatic firearm that also had one of 5 features on it. And if it had one of those features, such as a bayonet lug or a pistol grip, one of those 5 features made it a military-style semi-automatic. And it was more about appearance rather than function. The only one that had to do with function was a large capacity magazine. But at the time, they never restricted who could own or who could purchase those large capacity magazines. So really, there was no need for the military-style semi-automatic. What there was a need for was the restriction of those large capacity magazines. So in answer to your question, Michael, yes, I believe it is a motive. And I also don't agree with us looking at the firearm, that we ban the firearm. It's actually the person using the firearm. And that's where our fit and proper process needs to be robust, and it needs to be consistent, because no matter what type of firearm, it's never going to pick itself up and shoot people. So it's the person who has issued the license.
Yeah, well, I mean, I moved to Central Otago, and one of the things I thought about purchasing was just a simple 22 for the purpose of shooting the occasional rabbit, because we've got plenty of those around us at the moment. And I looked at it and went, oh, bugger this. So I never purchased the 22, can I say, because it seems such an incredible rigmarole to go through to get a license to purchase a vehicle, purchase a gun, and obviously a lot of people do, but it is a rigmarole, isn't it? I mean, I assumed that my pedigree and my background would be checked to see if I was some sort of mad bastard or, you know, a card-carrying member of the Headhunters Club or something like gang or something like that, and that would exclude me automatically from purchasing a weapon anyhow, wouldn't it?
Well, you would think so. One of the new changes that I'm making in the new arms law is disqualifying any gang member on the national gangs list from having a licence. And I've heard people say, well, they wouldn't get a licence anyway. But the actual fact is, when I came into Parliament back in 2020, a question was asked of the then Labor government, how many members on the national gangs list have firearm licences? Michael, there were over 20. And so when licensed firearm owners are being told, you are the problem, you are supplying firearms to the gangs, and yet
Mm.
26 known gang members have firearm licenses, you've got to say that's another loophole that we have to close. And again, come back down to who are the people that are getting the licenses, and do we have that robust system in place? And what's really good to know, I think, for our community is every licensed firearm owner is under constant scrutiny by New Zealand Police and the regulator as to their fit and proper status. So if they come to the attention of police for some reason, say they have a drink driving offence or there's been a call out to their place, that actually gets registered in the past with the police, it will in the future be with the regulator, that they've come to the attention of the regulator. And the regulator then can then make a decision about whether or not they go knock on their door and say, hey, is everything all right? Things going okay? We've had a few call-outs for you. We're ascertaining whether or not you are still fit and proper to be in possession of a firearm.
Listen, well, just going back, rolling back to the McSkimming affair, though, Angela Brazier, who is the Executive Director of Firearms at New Zealand Police, she's one of the key figures in this IPCA report because she provided a character and report or endorsement for McSkimming as he was applying, going through the police. Will she be without a job? Will she now lose her job, or that particular position be disestablished as a consequence of the changes to the firearms legislation?
I'm unable to speak to her particular issues at the moment. I understand that there will be, I guess, questions being asked by other ministerial agencies, and so I don't want to get involved in that. But what I can say to you is that we are changing the structure of the Firearm Safety Authority. So they will actually be led by a chief executive who is also having the role of a statutory officer, and that person will be appointed by the Governor-General upon the recommendation of Cabinet. So there's no guarantee that the people in the top jobs will continue. They will have to apply for those jobs, be considered on their own merits. Whether or not Ms Brazier decides to do that will be up to her, but it will be a whole new process looking for the leader of that new agency.
Right, so they won't be subordinate to the New Zealand Police then. If they're a well,
No,
I suppose they will be, but they're a statutory appointment, so there will be an external, if you like, lever or rule run over their appointment. Is that correct?
correct. And that
Yeah.
new chief executive will report directly to the minister responsible for
Oh,
firearms,
okay. Right,
and there will be oversight of them by the Minister of Justice. The
right.
difference here is that the agency will be hosted by police, and the hosting is purely so we can share information with the registries. So the regulator, Firearm Safety Authority, currently have the new register, and New Zealand Police have NEA, which have the old register. Some people don't realise there were quite a number of firearms registered before the main registry came in. So these two need to be able to share information. So allowing the regulator to be hosted by police gets that sharing arrangement underway, but police blue shirts are out of the regulatory agency. It's going to be non-sworn, real people that have an understanding about firearms, that come from the community, that can regulate and administer firearms, leaving police just with the enforcement. So no blue shirts in this agency. Police are completely out, apart from the information sharing that they need to do for enforcement procedures.
The other thing is, how many firearms are there roughly in this country? I think I've read, is it about 1 million or is it more than that? Do we
It's
know?
more than that. No, we don't know, and this has been part of the argument for why we need to have a registry so that we know what the number is. I think that even if they do say that 100% of firearm owners have entered the registry, we still won't know the real number because we have unlicensed people who
Mm,
are in possession that will never enter the registry.
mm, mm. Well, and so uh, do you have a rough stab, or is there a rough estimate of how many firearms are floating around New Zealand at any given time, Minister?
Well, I think the police have estimated somewhere between 1.5 million to 2.5 million
Oh, that's quite a lot.
firearms out there.
Wow.
But it's really hard to ascertain. I mean, they expected that they would get about 1 million firearms, or sorry, quite a large amount of firearms in during the confiscation period, also known as the buyback.
Yeah.
They thought that they would get it in there, and they only got 60,000. So really hard to ascertain. What gets me too, though, is that we have importers here who have imported firearms. They've been given import permits that go through customs, and yet no one has pulled all of those together to actually add them all up to give us a good indication of how many firearms that they think might be in the country. But then, of course, we've got World War One and World War Two, where a lot of firearms came back from overseas before we had the licensing regime that we have. And I know that some people are still finding boxed firearms in attics when they purchase houses, or grandparents die because they bought them back from the war. So it's a really hard number to try and figure out, or to even, you know, guess, I guess.
Um, there seem to be more gang shootings. In fact, I'd say in my lifetime, I've never known there to be as many gang shootings as there are now, and gang murders involving firearms. Are they using licensed firearms, or firearms that are being acquired positively, or are they firearms that are in the main purchased on the black market?
I think it's a combination of all of that, depending on who's doing it and where they're getting the firearms from. It's one of the reasons that I'm creating a new offence for anyone being found with a firearm without a serial number on it. It means that they are wanting to use it for illegal
Illegal
purposes.
purpose,
So
yeah. Mm.
we will be putting hefty penalties and offences to try and combat that. I always refer to the licensed firearm owners, because of their fit and proper status, as my golden apples in a golden barrel. But Michael, we all know that you get the rotten ones every now and again, and it's a matter of being able to pull them out. So there will be some licensed firearm owners, we've seen it in the news, that have converted firearms to a legal purpose, and we need to get them out. And this is why it's so important that we do focus on the person rather than the firearm, because it's the person themselves that are committing the crimes.
Okay, and finally, I've got a couple of emails here from people, Aira and Nick, who say, listen, I keep on getting, if I get another email from the Firearm Safety Authority that uses the word Te Purika before the English name first, I'll not be engaging with them. And would you ask the Minister, says Ira, why this new entity is named in Te Reo first when it's the government's promised to remove this virtue signalling rubbish? Will you be dealing
Yeah,
with that as
and
well?
I will be dealing with that. What I didn't want to do, Michael, was spend a lot of money getting them to change their name right now when everything's going to change again once this law goes through. So I just ask people to be patient. It is my intent that there will be an English name so that people understand who it is that they're dealing with in the future. But I did not want to waste taxpayer money on doing that now when it's going to happen anyway.
All right. And so you expect the legislation to be through all its hearings and its committee stages, pass into law when? What, May, we're talking April, May next year?
Yes, what we're looking at is first reading before Christmas, so we've only got a few
Oh,
sitting
okay.
weeks
Yeah.
left. It will have its first reading. It will then go into select committee, and I've been granted, I'm not sure of the date yet, but granted permission to extend the submission period, because otherwise it looks like it's going to land over the Christmas holidays. We then have within our coalition agreement that we must pass the new arms legislation through all stages before the end of the term. So I would expect that by July 2026, depending on what the Leader of the House schedule is, we should have all stages go through before we finish up this term.
All right. Thank you very much, Nicole McKee. I appreciate your explanations and wish you well for the rest of the week. Sorry, just quickly, How long is part? I think you've extended your sitting hours this week from memory. How long are you in parliamentary session? Are you going right through to Christmas now?
We go straight through until the 18th of December, will be when the
Right.
House rises.
Yeah.
Next week is I've got one more week. I'm getting a bit lost. It's a bit groundhoggy here at the moment. We have one more sitting week, then a recess, then we go into a 3-week sitting block, and that's the last block before our Christmas break.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Nicole McKee, Associate Minister of Justice, appreciate your time on the latest changes or on the changes to the firearms. To be honest with you, not owning a firearm and looking at all the rigmarole that I had to do to acquire one, I just gave up. I just went, oh, bugger off. There's just so much to do. So for those of you who do own firearms and they're registered and whatever you're doing, good luck to you. I mean, you must really need them. That's all I can say.